never imagined I'd walk in on something like this, especially not in my own kitchen. But that day, when the house was finally quiet and I thought everything was normal, I saw something I still can't believe: my nephew, almost crossing a line that could never be undone. You think you know the people closest to you. You trust them, you welcome them into your home, but sometimes trust can be broken in the most unexpected ways. I didn't expect what I saw that day, and honestly, I still can't shake it off. Let me tell you how I almost caught my nephew doing something I never thought I'd see, right there in my kitchen. It was supposed to be a normal family gathering, nothing special. We do this often, have everyone over for a meal, share a few laughs, and enjoy each other's company. That day was no different. My house was filled with the usual noise of chatter and clattering plates, kids running around, adults lounging in the living room talking about whatever was new in their lives, and of course me, stuck in the kitchen like always. I didn't mind, though. Cooking for everyone was something I enjoyed, something that kept me busy while everyone else enjoyed themselves. The kitchen had become my comfort zone, in a way. It was my space, and I felt in control there. As the evening wore on, people slowly started to leave. First, the kids got tired and were taken home. Then the parents followed. Before I knew it, the house that had been buzzing with energy all day suddenly felt empty. But not completely. My nephew had stayed behind. He'd said he wanted to help clean up, which seemed harmless enough. I didn't think much of it at the time. He's always been the type to offer help, always been respectful, and he wasn't the type to cause any trouble. At least, that's what I thought. He was a charming guy, my nephew, the kind of person people naturally liked. Maybe it was his smile, or the way he always seemed to know exactly what to say. He was the guy who could make anyone feel comfortable, who could talk to anyone and make them feel like they mattered. But looking back now, I realized there was always something a little too smooth about him, something I hadn't noticed before because I didn't want to see it. After all, he was family. What reason would I have to doubt him? As I continued cleaning up, I noticed he wasn't doing much to help. He was just kind of standing there, hovering around the kitchen island, watching me. I asked him if he was okay, and he just smiled and said he was fine. But the way he was looking at me, it was different. I couldn't quite put my finger on it at first, but there was something off. You know that gut feeling you get when something's not right? That's what I started to feel. But I brushed it off. Maybe I was just being paranoid. Maybe I was tired from the long day, and my mind was playing tricks on me. But then he started getting closer. It was subtle at first, just standing a little too close, leaning over the counter when he didn't need to. I tried to ignore it, kept my focus on the dishes I was washing, but as he stood there, I could feel the tension building. He wasn't acting like himself. Or maybe this was who he really was, and I just hadn't seen it until now. Either way, something was definitely off. I could feel it in my bones. Still, I didn't say anything. I didn't want to believe that anything inappropriate was happening. I mean, this was my nephew. He's family. We're supposed to trust each other, right? So I gave him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he was just being friendly and I was overreacting. But that uneasy feeling wouldn't go away. It wasn't long before things escalated. As I kept working in the kitchen, the air felt heavier. My nephew hadn't moved much from where he stood, and I could feel his eyes on me the entire time. It was strange. Normally, when people stick around to help, they're busy doing something, tidying up, putting things away. But he wasn't doing any of that. Help me reach my first 1,000 subscribers. Your support is what makes this journey possible, so don't forget to subscribe. He was just there. I tried to make small talk to cut the tension, asking him about his day, about work, anything to bring the mood back to normal. He answered, but his responses were short, distracted, like he wasn't really paying attention to what I was saying. He was more focused on something else, and I had a pretty good idea what it was. My heart started racing, and I told myself to calm down, that I was imagining things. But deep down, I knew I wasn't. I just didn't want to face it. He stepped closer again. This time, it was more obvious. He was standing right next to me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his body. My skin crawled, but I didn't know how to react. I wasn't scared exactly, but I felt uncomfortable in a way that made my stomach turn. Still, I didn't want to make a scene. I wanted to believe that this was nothing more than an awkward moment, that maybe he didn't realize how close he was. So I kept washing dishes, trying to act like everything was fine. Then he made a comment that sent chills down my spine. It was something small, but the way he said it, I knew he wasn't joking. "You know, I always thought you were different," he said, his voice low and smooth. "There's something about you that's just not like the others." I froze. My hand stopped scrubbing the plate in front of me, and I just stood there for a moment, trying to process what he had said. Different. Not like the others. What did that even mean? I didn't want to ask, because I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. My brain was scrambling, trying to figure out how to get out of this situation without making it worse. I could feel the tension in the room thickening, and I realized that this wasn't going to go away on its own. I turned to face him, forcing a smile, hoping to play it off like a joke. "What do you mean by that?" I asked, keeping my voice light, though inside I was starting to panic. He just smiled, that same unsettling smile he had been wearing all evening, and shrugged. "You're just different." "In a good way," he said, his eyes lingering on me in a way that made my skin crawl. This was it. This was the moment where everything could go wrong. I had to do something, say something to stop this before it went any further. But how? I couldn't just accuse him outright, not without making the whole situation even more awkward. And what if I was wrong? What if this was all just a misunderstanding? But then again, what if I wasn't? I turned back to the sink, my heart pounding in my chest. I needed to think. I needed a way out, but every second that passed felt like the walls were closing in. My nephew was still standing there, too close, and I knew if I didn't do something soon, things were going to take a turn I wasn't ready for. I could feel the pressure mounting, the kind of tension that you can't shake off no matter how hard you try. My nephew hadn't moved away, and I could feel his presence even though I wasn't looking at him. The situation had gone from uncomfortable to outright disturbing, but I was still trying to play it cool, trying to act like I didn't notice what was happening. I didn't want to escalate things. I didn't want to believe it could actually be going where I feared it might. He stepped even closer, and this time I felt his arm brush against mine. I froze. The air in the kitchen seemed to thicken, and for a moment all I could hear was the sound of my own heart beating, pounding in my ears. My mind was racing, trying to figure out what to do next. It was like I was stuck in this horrible moment, unsure of how to get out of it without causing a scene. But I knew I couldn't just stand there forever, pretending like nothing was wrong. I had to act. I took a deep breath and forced myself to keep my voice steady. "Can you hand me that towel?" I asked, pointing to the counter across the kitchen. It was a simple request, something that might give me a few seconds of space, a chance to clear my head. He hesitated for a second, his eyes lingering on me in a way that made me feel exposed. But then he stepped back and grabbed the towel. I let out a small sigh of relief, though I knew this wasn't over. As he handed me the towel, he lingered again, standing too close for comfort. His hand brushed mine again, but this time it was deliberate. There was no mistaking it. He wasn't just being clumsy or absent-minded, he was testing boundaries. My heart raced, and my stomach turned with a mixture of disbelief and disgust. How could this be happening? How could he think this was okay? I wasn't just his aunt. I was family. But here we were, in my own kitchen, and he was pushing limits that should have never even been touched. I pulled my hand away quickly and tried to keep my composure, but I could feel the panic rising in my chest. I needed to put an end to this, but the words wouldn't come. I didn't know how to confront him without making things worse, without creating a situation that I might not be able to handle. So instead of addressing it directly, I tried to deflect. "You know," I said, forcing a light laugh, "you don't need to hang around here. I've got this covered." He didn't move. Instead, he gave me a smile that made my skin crawl. "I don't mind staying," he said, his voice low and casual like we were having a normal conversation. "It's not like I have anywhere else to be." That was the moment when I knew for sure that this wasn't just my imagination. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a simple case of him being too friendly. He was pushing something, testing to see how far he could go, and it scared me, not because I thought he would hurt me, but because I realized just how far this could have gone if I hadn't been paying attention. I needed to get him out of the house, and fast. But how do you tell someone to leave without making it obvious that you're on to them? How do you keep things from blowing up when the situation is already spiraling out of control? I didn't have the answers, but I knew I couldn't just stand there and let this happen. I had to do something. I turned to face him, my heart pounding in my chest, and forced myself to meet his gaze. "Actually, you should probably head out," I said, trying to keep my voice calm and steady. "It's getting late, and I've still got a lot to clean up." For a moment, he didn't move. He just stood there, watching me, and I could see the wheels turning in his mind. He was debating something, probably wondering if he should push further or back off. I held my breath, waiting for his reaction. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he nodded slowly and took a step back. "All right," he said, his voice still too casual for comfort. "I'll head out." I watched as he slowly made his way toward the door. Every step he took felt like a weight was being lifted off my chest, but the tension still lingered in the air. I wasn't out of this yet. He paused at the doorway, turning back to look at me one last time, his eyes lingering, that unsettling smile still on his face. "You know," he said, his voice softer now, "if you ever need anything, you can always call me." I forced a tight smile, my fingers gripping the dish towel in my hand like it was the only thing grounding me to reality. "Yeah, sure," I replied, hoping my voice didn't betray the anxiety I was feeling. "Thanks." He stood there for another second, as if waiting for me to say something else. But when I didn't, he finally turned and left. The sound of the door closing behind him was like a release, and I felt my whole body relax for the first time in what felt like hours. I stood there in the empty kitchen, staring at the door, trying to process everything that had just happened. It all felt so surreal, like I had just escaped something I didn't fully understand. The house was eerily quiet now, and for the first time, I realized just how alone I was. The tension that had been hanging in the air was gone, but it left behind a heavy, unsettling feeling that I couldn't shake. My mind was racing, replaying everything that had just happened. What if I hadn't trusted my instincts? What if I had ignored those small signs and let the situation go even further? It was a terrifying thought, and I didn't want to think about it any longer. I leaned against the counter, letting out a shaky breath. My hands were trembling, and I didn't know if it was from the adrenaline or the sheer disbelief of what had just occurred. How had things gone so wrong? How had I missed the signs? And more importantly, how was I going to handle this moving forward? I couldn't just pretend it didn't happen. This wasn't something I could sweep under the rug and forget about. But at the same time, what could I do? He was family. I wasn't sure who I could even talk to about it. If I told anyone, it would create a ripple effect, tearing through the family and leaving damage in its wake. And yet, if I kept quiet, I'd be carrying this burden alone. Either way, the situation felt impossible. I couldn't get the image of him standing there, too close, with that look in his eyes, out of my head. It was burned into my memory, and no matter how hard I tried, I knew it was something that would stick with me for a long time. The reality of it all finally sank in. I had narrowly avoided something that could have shattered so much more than just trust. It could have ruined relationships, broken the family apart, and left me questioning everything I thought I knew about the people closest to me. After a few minutes, I decided to distract myself by going back to cleaning up. But even as I wiped down the counters and put away the dishes, my mind kept drifting back to the same question: how could this have happened? My nephew, someone I had known his entire life, had crossed a line I never thought possible. It was a sobering realization, and it left me questioning not just him, but everything about our family dynamic. Were there signs that I had overlooked? Or had he always been this way, and I had just been too blind to see it? As the minutes passed and the kitchen became spotless again, I realized that cleaning wouldn't fix what had happened. The unease I felt wasn't going to disappear with a little soap and water. The house might look perfect on the outside, but inside, things had changed. I had changed. The trust that had once been there wasn't so solid anymore. And I wasn't sure if I could look at him the same way again, or if I even wanted to. But one thing was certain: I wasn't going to let this go. This wasn't just a moment I could forget about or sweep under the rug. I had to find a way to address it, to deal with it, even if that meant having a difficult conversation with him in the future. I wasn't sure how that would go, or if I'd even be able to handle it. But what I did know was that I couldn't let this slide, not for my sake, and not for the sake of the rest of the family. In that moment, I realized that trust is fragile, even with the people you think you know the best. And once it's broken, it's hard to put it back together.